Testing, testing. Not better. It's norovirus. Norwalk virus, sometimes referred to as a winter vomiting disease. Common cause of gastroenteritis, characterized by non-bloody diarrhea, vomiting, stomach pain, fever, headaches. Symptoms usually develop 24 hours after being exposed. Recovery typically occurs within 1 to 3 days. Complications are uncommon. Lame. Welcome to the Truman Show. Why does it pick that up but not the fucking music? Whoopsie whoopsie.
And that's who I'm listening to or learning from is the locals. If you see the videos of them driving in, it's a pueblo, it's dirt roads. I think it's 3 or 4 SUVs, and they're coming in like if they're royalty. And some people are praising them, but the people who know say they're there for the red juice. It's all over. For those of you who don't know what that is, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to. The locals in that area, and that's who I'm listening to or learning from the locals. If you see any of the videos of them driving in, it's a pueblo, it's dirt roads. I think it's 3.
Mother always said, when the river runs red, take the dirt road.
always been good. And
Yeah,
often the Bears and Packers were not.
I was going to give you Canadians Maple Leafs vote.
Over Packers, Bears?
You have Iowa State wrestling on your Mount Rushmore. What are you talking about? This is more.
Bunch of fags.
In one place, it means you can be switched off at the touch of a button. So they brought this system in Thailand, and simultaneously, over 3 million people had their bank accounts shut down. Thailand has become a case study for the use of biometric data in every facet of life. Every banking transaction is monitored and scrutinized. Any perceived discrepancy is flagged as fraud and punished without due process. Regulations have overwhelmed the system, resulting in a full-fledged banking crisis. Over 3 million Thai bank accounts were frozen instantaneously without warning as a result of government overreach. Transaction denied. You contact your bank to see why the payment failed, only to learn that your account has been frozen. All of your accounts, for that matter. The bank is investigating you for suspicious activity and potential money laundering or fraud. There was no warning, call, or letter. There was no clarification as to what transaction was flagged. Locked out of your accounts, you have lost the ability to purchase, you cannot fill your gas tank, you cannot purchase groceries, you've been completely removed from the financial system, and you do not know when or if you will regain access to your funds. This is the reality for millions of people banking in Thailand. That's crazy stuff, folks, and this freaked the entire country out. But the article goes on to say thousands of accounts are frozen each week. Panic has ensued. Retailers are no longer accepting cards, demanding cash, as they too are worried that they will be removed from the banking system. Confidence in the government and the entire banking system evaporated. People rationally fear that their account will be targeted next without government overreach has backfired, and the people are removing themselves from the banking system entirely. And that's a really good thing to folks. Yeah, so it backfired, and it caused the people in Thailand to see how much they need to keep cash alive and depend on cash. And they're saying it serves as a test case for what this digital ID is going to do. Well, it also serves as a test case for why you shouldn't accept it. And so many of us have been warning about this for so long, folks, and it's imperative that people see this, because this is what's been going on. While everyone's been arguing over whether Charlie Kirk died or whether he didn't, it doesn't matter. What matters is what they're going to do with it. Once you've got everything under one roof and you've got all your ID together in one place, it means you can be switched off at the touch of a button. So they brought this system in Thailand, and suddenly, simultaneously, over 3 million people.
Zip it. Check that out. Thermal scope. Spotting drones. That's dope. Not a chance.
The story began here in the Austrian town of Braunau, with a child born in this house, Adolf Hitler. At his peak, the most popular ruler in Europe. The child born here in Braunau belonged to that handful of human beings who have clearly and decisively changed the history of the 20th century. Linz, Austria, the site of the only memorial to the Hitler family, the grave of Hitler's parents. Nothing about his parents or Adolf's early life gave any hint of the extraordinary career that was to come.
Microsoft Network Real-Time.
His father, Alois,
Service.
was a stern, short-tempered customs official who beat his son. His mother, Clara, tried to protect him. When she died, young Adolf was broken by grief. He kept her portrait with him for the rest of his life. The infant Adolf was baptized and brought up as a Catholic. At the age of 6, he entered the monastery school at Lambach. Soon, he was top of his class. Hitler was a chorister at the great abbey church of Lambach. I used, he said, to intoxicate myself with the solemn splendor of the services. Every day when he sang in the choir, he saw the memorial to an earlier abbot. Above it was an emblem which a quarter of a century later, Hitler was to adopt for the Nazi party, the swastika. In his teens, Hitler became a moody adolescent. At secondary school in Linz, he lost interest in most of his work. His ambition was to go to Vienna and become an artist or architect. Once there, he produced architectural drawings and watercolors like these. Competent, but not good enough to win the place he longed for at his Academy of Fine Arts. Little by little, old Hitler's early ambitions in Vienna turned sour. After the shock of being turned down twice by the Academy of Fine Arts, he became a drifter. Hitler later called his period in Vienna the most miserable time of my life. 3 of those miserable years were spent here in a Viennese backstreet at this hostel for homeless men. In this depressing
Men are
hostel,
miserable.
the future Führer passed much of the day sitting with other inmates, churning out drawings and watercolors which earned him a modest income. When he drifted from Vienna to Germany in 1913, he was still dreaming of becoming a great artist or famous architect. Munich, the 1st of August, 1914. A cheering crowd welcomed the outbreak of the First World War. On the right is a photographer, and among the crowd he's photographing is the 25-year-old Adolf Hitler.
That's a popular mustache back then.
If you look at the tenacity of his service, I mean, he's a fanatic. And he petitioned King Ludwig III of Bavaria to enlist in what's referred to as the King's Own Regiment. That's an elite Bavarian unit. He was accepted, but put in the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry. And World War I is a major influence on Hitler's life. Now, he served his basic training without complaining, but he was always willing to offer his fellow comrades help. He spoke about the evil of tobacco and alcohol to his fellow soldiers. They liked him because of his drawings that he did for them. He would do sketches for them. Remember, he sketched and did a variety of things, in his youth, and was trying to get in the art school. So he really got along with his fellow soldiers. At one point during the trench duties in between 14 and 18, he will have a dog. Somebody's going to steal from him. During World War I, Adolf Hitler repeatedly volunteered for hazardous duty. His first combat was October the 29th, 1914. Hitler's unit lost 3,000 of its 3,600 men after making 5 assaults on the enemy position. Now, Hitler had one of his sleeves shot off. He walked out of a tent where he'd been talking with some men, and a couple of seconds later, a shell hits it and blows at the Kingdom Come. And for his fighting in this unit, he was awarded the Iron Cross Second Class for bravery under fire, and he was promoted to corporal. This is a well-deserved award. Later came a runner, which meant he moved messages from the rear to the front, and it's a very high mortality job, and he liked it. He always liked that job. Then in December of 1914, when you have the famous Christmas truce on December the 25th, Hitler wouldn't leave his trench. And his comment was, such a thing should not happen in wartime. And then he told his buddies that participated that they were wrong to get involved. So no fun while the war goes on. Those are your enemies. Now, between 1914 and 1916, in the final stages of the Battle of the Somme, Adolf Hitler was wounded in the leg by a shell fragment. This sent him back to Germany to recover. And he's there for about 5 months. Hitler could have stayed back in Germany on light duty because of his wound, but demanded to be sent back to the front. So he's no shirker. You got to give a guy some due here for not being a chicken. A lot of people, looked for a way to get out of there. Then you have Hitler back again on trench duty, And then he shows up again during the, of course, German offensives. Now, during the Ludendorff offensives, he was armed with a pistol, and he captured 5 French soldiers. And for that, he received the Iron Cross First Class. And you didn't get those at any time in the war for free. You can't dismiss his decorations. He wins the Iron Cross Second Class in 1914, First Class in 1918, and then in mid-October, he got another battlefield decoration. But he's never promoted because he had a captain. Captain Fritz Wiedemann said he lacked the capacity for leadership. You just can't make those statements. As the war turned against Germany, he believed that the pacifists and the shirkers, which are people trying to get out of duty, were losing the war. And the thing that enraged him even worse is what is referred to as defeatism in the ranks. They're actually non-commissioned officers who said it was stupid to keep fighting. He beat one up. So we have a corporal beating up a non-commissioned officer and didn't get into trouble for it. He's a fanatic. The end of the war, Hitler was gassed by the British forces advancing near Ypres in mid-October 1918. It bloated his face up, and particularly his eyelids, constantly watering eyes, had a hoarse voice. He then had this terrible pain. He referred to it, quote, piercing pain in my eye socket. He hated leaving the front to go to the hospital. He considered it the happiest chapter in his life. Being there, being something, being with people. You know, he had friends and he had comrades while he was in the war. He was not a loner. He had the respect of his fellow soldiers. He had purpose. By early November, Hitler's spirits had come back, and it was very common for people who had been gassed to plunge into depression because they're concerned about being blind the rest of their lives. On November the 9th, this is 2 days before the armistice, a local pastor came to the hospital and told the patients that on November the 8th that the Kaiser had abdicated and Germany was now a republic. And he told them that the war was lost.
Defeat was followed by a humiliating peace at Versailles. The injustice of Versailles rankled with most Germans for the next 20 years. Unable to accept that the German army had lost the war, Hitler convinced himself that the soldiers had been stabbed in the back by communist revolutionaries and parliamentary politicians. Stab in the back, he believed, was part of a great Jewish conspiracy. Suddenly, Hitler discovered the greatest talent he possessed, the gift of public speaking. He joined a small group of fanatical nationalists in Munich. They became the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazis. In 1921, Hitler became their leader. The first film of the Apprentice Führer campaigning shows him as still a rather awkward figure, not yet certain of his role as Germany's messiah. In 1923, Hitler felt strong enough to try and seize power in Munich. Emil Klein, the only stormtrooper still alive who marched with Hitler, now retraces their steps. Everything went well until the marchers found armed police blocking their exit from a narrow street.
Wir waren noch singend hier die Straße.
We were still singing as we marched down the street. And suddenly, we heard shots being fired ahead of us. The procession stopped. We were speechless and couldn't explain what had happened, until word came from the front of the march saying that Hitler was dead.
Ich sah Männer
I saw men with tears in their eyes. And I myself was very moved too, and had great difficulty keeping myself under control.
Though Hitler in fact survived the hail of bullets, he was arrested and locked in a cell at Landsberg prison. At first he was so depressed he refused to eat. Then his confidence returned as he discovered that the failed uprising had made him a local hero. At the trial, Hitler rounded on his accusers. He told the judges who gave him a prison sentence, "History will tear to tatters the verdict of this court."
You have been accused of high treason and called an enemy of the state.
If I am guilty of anything, then I am guilty of fighting to defend the rights of the Germans.
Herr Hitler, the court finds you guilty of treason. You hereby sentenced to a fine 200 gold marks, 5 years in land prison. You will be eligible for parole in 9 months.
After the propaganda triumph at his trial, Hitler set out to write the Bible of National Socialism. He dictated much of the text here in his cell to his faithful follower, Rudolf Hess. On Saturday evenings, the other prisoners sat around as Hitler read out the completed chapters to them. The book as a whole dwells on the great obsessions which had come to dominate Hitler's political thought: the Jews, racism, living space for German people, the evils of communism and parliamentary democracy. But it also includes Hitler's views on a variety of other topics, ranging from boxing to syphilis. The amazing appeal Hitler was later to exercise, but on his mastery of the spoken word. After prison, the leader, or Führer as he now called himself, had a new political strategy. Instead of planning another coup, he aimed to win power at the polls. What was to win him millions of votes was instead his vision of a great national revival. Hitler's election opportunity came with the onset of the Depression. In a few years, 1 in 3 of the labor force was out of work. Ilse Wentel was a church social worker during the Depression among the unemployed in the Berlin slums.
The despair was so terrible as I can't describe it. You had everywhere beggars. Wherever you went in Berlin, you had beggars.
The democratic political parties offered no solution. To millions of Germans, the only hope was Adolf Hitler.
Have you been to the marketplace? Do you know how much it costs for a loaf of bread these days?
500,000 marks. 500,000 marks. The wheelbarrows aren't big enough to carry the money in.
He's afraid I'll stir things up. You tell Commissar Karl. This is not a time for silence.
I supported Hitler because he, after having seen all that depravity, all that poverty here, was the only one who could do social justice to the people here.
He had that ability, the ability derived from his readiness to throw himself totally open, to appear, as it were, bare and naked before his audience, to tear open his heart and display, to throw on a few extra generators and suddenly become absolutely charged with energy.
Ich habe des Falles abgelehnt, jemals vor dieses Volk hinzutreten und billige Versprechungen zu geben.
It wasn't as though he was using words, it's as though the emotions came direct without words. It was a rawness about it to power.
In uns selbst allein liegt die Zukunft des deutschen Volkes.
6.5 billion votes, 107 seats. Biggest party in the Reichstag.
Get me Hitler.
Einen Feind, einen Deutschland, einen Platz, eine Herrlichkeit. Dann werden wir wieder mit Vorstein, genau wie die Väter einst auch. Deutschland nicht gestellt dahin, sondern selbst im Stadt.
Nobody's ever had this power to move on the system. Everybody says it the way he says it.
Hitler comes to power, not as he had hoped through outright victory at the polls, but as head of a coalition government. As this withering glance suggests, Hitler despises his coalition partners. He quickly outmaneuvers them and establishes his own dictatorship.
A month after he comes to power, the Reichstag building, the Parliament building in Berlin, is set on fire. This happens to come at the time when he is constantly insisting that there is a communist plot to overthrow the new government and to carry out a revolution. And the Reichstag fire goes up in flames, which everybody could see. Before that night was over, he had got a set of decrees drawn up which transformed the situation politically. All the guarantees which people in any democratic state, the freedom of speech and so on, freedom from arrest, all this is swept away.
A majority of Germans tolerate the burning of books, the banning of other political parties, and the setting up of a police state, because Hitler offers a way out of the depression.
If he's doing things which are not so good, which happened, then we said, well, you have to take the rough with the smooth. Dictatorship seemed to be the only way to get out of the mess. And so I thought that was a good thing that they cut away all this nonsense and rather did something, really did something, and that's what Hitler did.
He eliminated the crushing unemployment that Germany suffered. And he gave millions of people new confidence and indeed welfare. They were doing better, much better.
They came in their tens of thousands, full of youthful idealism, to worship the Führer in the awesome surroundings of Nuremberg Stadium. Among the worshippers in the Hitler Youth was Alfons Heck, now a writer on the Nazi period.
The decisive turning point in my life occurred at the age of 10. From that moment on, I would remain beholden to Adolf Hitler long until after it. I was one of 82,000 members of the Hitler Youth lined up in the Zeppelin's field. I stood in the first row. And when Hitler began to speak, we were just tingling with nervousness, finally to see our God. When he appeared on the podium, I was afraid to look at my neighbor because I didn't want him to see the tears in my eyes. My knees were shaking. And Hitler beamed down on us. He calmed us down by lifting his hands, both hands, several times. When he began to speak, it was in a very conditional tone. Man to boy, father to son.
Und ich weiß, das kann nicht anders sein. Denn ihr seid Fleisch von unserem Fleisch und Blut, von unserem Blut. Und in euren jungen Gehirn brennt dasselbe Geist, der uns beherrscht.
And he said how fortunate we were to live in this new age. And he said, from now on, you no longer have to fear any class distinction. You're all one. But the essence and the emphasis occurred in the final sentences. He leaned over the podium, and I know he looked straight into my eyes, and he said, you, my boys, the young of Germany, live in a fortunate time because you are the standard bearers of the movement. You will inherit what we have so far created. And from that moment on, without any doubt, I was bound to Adolf Hitler, long until after our defeat.
Vor uns liegt Deutschland, in uns marschiert Deutschland und hinter uns kommt Deutschland.
The mid-1930s were the halcyon years of Hitler's Germany. Germany was at peace, her prosperity restored, her national pride recovered. To those prepared to ignore or justify the police state, it seemed a beautiful Germany. A host of distinguished foreign visitors, many with impeccable democratic credentials, came to call on the Führer at his mountain retreat, the Berghof. Among them was the former British Prime Minister, David Lloyd George. With LG was his secretary, Albert Sylvester.
Hitler ran down the flight of stairs to welcome LG as he got out of his car, shook hands with him most warmly, and conducted us into the inside of the Berghof. This massive room, the only light of which came from a massive window, which was terrific. I'd never seen such a window.
Lloyd George said, "You have done great things for Germany. You have restored her honor, and you have gained for her equal rights."
I've met a few armchair politicians who care more about their money than they do their own country.
Yes, but surely as your party's propaganda leader, you must know that in order to defend their money, they'll spend it, a good deal of it. That is, if someone they trust tells them it's a safe bet. That's right. Herr Hitler, I can make you very far. But you have to admit, the color catches the eye.
On the morning of the 12th of March 1938, German soldiers crossed the border into neighboring Austria. They were greeted not with bullets and guns, but with roses and carnations. So much so that the action became known as the Blumenkrieg, the War of Flowers. Most of the Austrian people, envying what they saw as the economic success and prestige that Hitler had brought to Germany, now welcomed their German neighbors. One people, one Reich, one leader. In a demonstration of how central he was personally to this whole system, Hitler traveled across Austria on a campaign tour.
Ich will dabei in Zukunft nichts anderes sein, als was ich in der Vergangenheit war. Warner meines Volkes, Lehrer meines Volkes und der Führer meines Volkes. Und diesem Volk kommt nicht zum Reich in einer demütigenden Rolle. Ich selber führe euch ein.
I think that in some period around the end of 37, 38, Hitler feels, well, this is fine, but I didn't come to power just to restore German self-confidence and so on. There's more. He changes gear, I think. And then getting rid of a number of the old guard in the army and the foreign office and so on. And he becomes more aggressive.
It was the 12th of March 1938. Austria was showered with swastikas. He crossed the border near his birthplace at Braunau. The people rejoiced at the Anschluss, which they saw as the fulfillment of an old dream of the German nation, an emphatic display of self-determination, a right denied to the German people under the Versailles Treaty, whose terms were generally considered unjust. Visibly moved, he entered Vienna, and the city that had seen his early failures now gave him a hero's reception. Homage was being paid to the man who had achieved the unification of the German people.
Als Führer und Kanzler der deutschen Nation und des Reichs melde ich vor der deutschen Gerichte nunmehr den Eintritt meiner Heimat in das Deutsche Reich.
The welcome here was the most tumultuous yet.
It was here, far from the millions of his followers, that Hitler felt most able to relax. The inner circle at the Berghof saw a quite different man from the charismatic Führer of the party rallies. Life at Hitler's retreat was both reassuring and agreeable. And there was an entertaining side to the off-duty Führer, as Ribbentrop's private secretary discovered.
I was overwhelmed by the possibility to meet the Führer personally. And for instance, for the beginning, he was a sort of a messiah for me. He was a man who liked a joke, would laugh a lot. He didn't accept two sorts of jokes, dirty jokes and political jokes. They were banned. But all the other jokes he enjoyed terribly.
Hitler had no close friends in whom to confide his innermost feelings. He could never admit human weakness to anyone. But the inner circle discovered one secret of his private life, which was unknown to ordinary Germans.
When Hitler was talking for hours and I was standing near to the wall, waiting until they want some papers or something. And the curtain opened of Eva Braun appeared and said, Adolf, we must have luncheon now. And she didn't bother him with political questions, and he didn't want to give her influence, and he thought that as long as he is a bachelor, he has the love from the German women, because if he's married, the impression is not the same on the other women. And she gave him a little bit a home of a bourgeois quality, with tea, with cake, and I think with sex.
You think it was a sexual relationship?
Certainly.
In 1919, the Allies at Versailles formed a new country called Czechoslovakia. The population will now consist of 6.7 million Czechs, 3.1 million Germans, 2 million Slovaks, 700,000 Hungarians, and 460,000 Germans.
Es liegt nichts anderes als die Realisierung dessen, was er selbst soll. Gucken Sie an. Er hat jetzt in seiner Hand Frieden oder Frieden. Er wird ein jeder Frieden Angebot jetzt akzeptieren und den Deutschen endlich die Freiheit geben. Oder wir werden diese Freiheit nicht holen.
A wave of relief and gratitude for the Führer swept Germany. His iron nerve had freed the Germans in Czechoslovakia and yet averted war.
Sie waren uns der Garant des Sieges. Sie sind uns der Garant des Friedens. Adolf Hitler! Sieg Heil!
The U.S. State Department, in its 3-volume report on the origins of communism in Russia, published in 1931, reveals how Jewish-controlled German banks, under the leadership of Max Warburg, conspired as early as 1914 to send large payments to Lenin, Trotsky, and others in their attempts to bring down the Tsar. White Russian patriots heroically attempted to regain their freedom from the Jews. The Judaica says compact Jewish masses were utilized by the Bolsheviks to suppress such counter-revolution. Clearly, Jews and Nazis were engaged in a death struggle over the destiny of Russia. Unfortunately, the Jewish masses won. The Jewish masses won. The Jewish masses won.
We will survive. That's what they tell us. What they mean is they will survive. We surrendered in November at a time when we were perched on the edge of victory, betrayed by the cowards and the traitors within our ranks. How do we fight them? We unite. We must join together for a brighter harmony. We will hang the profiteers, crush the communists. We will disinfect our country of the Jewish vermin. Sacrifice. We will struggle, yes, but only then will we triumph, and we will triumph.
1914 was the year in which World War I broke out. Within 2 years, Germany had won that war. The German submarines, which were a surprise to the world, had swept all the convoys from the Atlantic Ocean, and Great Britain stood there without ammunition for her soldiers, stood there with 1 week's food supply, and after that, starvation. At that time, the French army had mutinied. They lost 600,000 of the flower of the French youth. The Russian army was defecting. They didn't like the Tsar. And the Italian army had collapsed. Not a shot had been fired on the German soil. Not an enemy soldier had crossed the border into Germany. And yet, here was Germany offering England peace terms. Well, England in the summer of 1916 was considering that. Seriously. They had no choice. While that was going on, the Zionists in Germany went to the British War Cabinet. Look here. You can win this war if the United States will come in as your ally. The price you must pay up is Palestine after you have won the war and defeated Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. They made that promise in October of 1916. Now, that is something that the people in the United States have never been told. They never knew why we went into World War I. After we got into the war, the Zionists went to Great Britain and they said, let's have something in writing that shows that you are going to keep your bargain and give up Palestine after you win the war. And that was called the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was merely Great Britain's promise to pay the Zionists what they had agreed upon as a consideration for getting the United States into the war. That is all the trouble started.
Above all, we must remove the Jews. They run our banks. They lost us the war. They alone are responsible for the economic disaster.
When you ask what have the Germans done to the Jews, you must always ask what done the Jews to the Germans. Since 1850, when the Jews got all the political rights in Germany, the German Reich, they have done three things which are really dramatic. Number one, they were a small minority of 2% of the population. At the time when Hitler came to power, 500,000 within 60 million German people. 500,000 among 60 million. They were a small minority. This small minority managed to control about 50% of the media, to give about 70% of all judges, to have a tremendous influence in movie and in theater and in literature. They were overrepresented. This is one thing. They were absolutely overrepresented, as today in England, in France, and in the United States. Second, Jews were at the origin of a lot of catastrophic financial bank crashes in Germany between 1870 and 1920. In that time, they made a lot of crashes which have, this is all documented. It's not Nazi propaganda or anti-Semitic or Arab propaganda. It's books have been published, even by Jewish Germans, about this problem. They have millions of German fathers have lost their incomes, their fortune, their savings because of these Jewish gangsters, bank gangsters and speculation people. Then the third point, which was psychologically the most dangerous of all, they have introduced into German art and culture and theater and movie decadence, immorality. The first homosexual theaters, plays, were made in Berlin in the 1920s. The first adultery theater plays were made in the 1880s and 1890s, 100 years ago, by Jewish authors. Adultery, then sexual perversions of all sorts, sadism, masochism, a lot of homosexuality, all these things, and then decadent art, you know, an art which is absolutely ridiculous, so-called modern art. It was all pushed by Jewish intellectuals, and this created among the German people a big revolt. And they wrote books ridiculing Christianity, ridiculing Jesus. And there were furious reactions in Germany. And this is why Adolf Hitler came to power. And you see then Hitler in 2 years, from 33 to 35, he brought 6 million unemployed Germans back into their jobs. He created 6 million jobs. It's incredible.
From the Baltic to the Black Sea, 3 million German soldiers are moving into position to launch Operation Barbarossa. The most brutal conflict between two nations in recorded history is about to begin. On the first day of Barbarossa alone, 1,200 Soviet aircraft are destroyed in a single strike. Panzer units sweeping east are already deep inside Soviet territory. Chaos multiplies the catastrophe. Without orders from the Kremlin, Red Army field commanders lose control of their units. Dazed, cut off, surrounded, thousands of Soviet soldiers surrender. And at the height of the Wehrmacht's ferocious onslaught, Stalin disappears completely. He has every reason to hide from his people. Captured German newsreel footage shows Soviet frontier troops overwhelmed, a retreat under fire in total confusion. Whole formations surrendering. Hundreds of thousands of men entangled with fleeing civilians in scenes of biblical disorder. Yet there are some Soviet citizens who welcome the invader. To many in the Ukraine, the arrival of the Germans is a heaven-sent opportunity to throw off Stalin's yoke. Local women bless the Germans as they pass. Their menfolk destroy reminders of a man who has terrorized them for years. Stalin is above all stunned by the sheer speed of the German advance. Still, the Germans drive east. They're at the outskirts of Kiev, Smolensk, and Leningrad. Yet fierce pockets of Red Army resistance fight on behind enemy lines. The fortress city of Brest. The besieged Red Army garrison fights on and on, for more than a month until they are finally compelled to surrender. Hitler is so impressed by the tenacity of the Russian troops that he exercises rare clemency. Only one survivor is shot, the political officer at the fortress, Mikhail Fomin. The Führer cites the defense of Brest as an heroic effort, an example to his own soldiers. And he visits the fortress with Mussolini to acknowledge hard-earned victory. But for Stalin, the defenders of Brest are not heroes. Years later, after their release from German capture, he will send survivors to the Gulag. The Wehrmacht's rapid, relentless advance seems unstoppable. Traveling at up to 50 miles a day, panzer divisions are already approaching the heart of Stalin's empire. And in the middle of July, Stalin is forced to consider offering the Germans a negotiated peace. While Stalin contemplates a way out of the war, he's drawing up plans to punish his own troops if they surrender. In a desperate attempt to halt the rout, he issues Order Number 270. All officers and political officials taken prisoner at the front are to be considered traitors.
Why is it giving a warning? Communist faggots.